Love, loss, and the search for clarity. Before it all spiraled, before the nights grew cold, and the words between us turned into weapons instead of whispers, there was a time when the world felt smaller in the best way, like it only had room for the two of us. That illusion, as comforting as it was, started long before we ever met. I was raised to believe love was linear, like following train tracks to a known destination. You meet, you commit, you stay. But the tracks never prepared me for detours, for derailments for someone like her. And maybe, deep down, I always sensed it. Some people are storms, and you either run or you're swallowed. I never ran. When I first met Clara, it wasn't a grand moment or a cinematic glance across a crowded room. It was quieter than that, and maybe that's why it hit harder. She was standing in line at a bookstore, her hair pulled up in a lazy knot that revealed the tiny crescent moon tattoo behind her ear. She was arguing with the clerk about a pre-order that hadn't arrived, and there was something about the way she stood her ground, politely but firmly, that made me take notice. I didn't speak to her then. I only watched as she walked away, the tiniest smirk tugging at the corner of her lips, victorious in her verbal sparring. I didn't think I'd see her again. But I did. 2 days later, at a mutual friend's dinner party, she walked in wearing the same leather jacket, an expression that didn't apologize for taking up space. I recognized her instantly. She didn't recognize me at all. That was the first imbalance. I liked her before she even knew my name. And when we did finally talk, it was electric. Not because we agreed on everything, but because we didn't. She challenged me. She questioned my certainties. She had this unnerving ability to make me rethink things I thought I had locked down. I was logic, routine, structure. She was chaos, wonder, a walking contradiction. I was terrified and hooked. From the start, I mistook our differences for compatibility. I thought the tension between our opposing natures would create balance. I mistook passion for permanence. We became as slowly, but with the force of inevitability. One night, one text, one laugh at a shared observation. It grew. And before I knew it, we were entangled in a way that felt permanent. She moved in without ever formally moving in. A toothbrush in my bathroom, a scarf on the chair, her books on my shelf, her scent, jasmine and something faintly like cigarettes, embedded into my pillows. We never said we were exclusive. We never needed to. Or at least, I didn't think we did. Our intimacy was unspoken, layered, casual on the surface but torrential underneath. We didn't do anniversaries or cheesy pet names. We had our own language at glances across a room, fingers grazing in passing, a single raised eyebrow that could say more than an essay. She'd leave me notes. Cryptic, poetic, sometimes just a single word on a napkin. I kept them all in a box I never told her about. Looking back, I see how little I asked. How content I was to be swept along in the current of her presence without anchoring myself in understanding. I didn't ask about the scars on her back or why she flinched when someone shouted across the street. I didn't press when she disappeared for days, returning with vague excuses and tired eyes. I told myself I trusted her, but maybe I just feared the answers. The beginning always wears a disguise. Ours were laughter, late-night drives, a shared playlist that somehow never ran out of perfect songs. She loved thunderstorms, claimed they helped her think. I'd sit with her on the balcony, drenched and shivering, just to hear the way she spoke when the sky was unraveling. Those moments felt like religion. But eventually, the silence between lightning strikes got longer. I don't know when exactly it started to change. Maybe it was when she began turning her phone face down. Or when our conversations started skipping the easy intimacy and landing in dry update tests, what we needed from the store. Who was picking up the dry cleaning? Maybe it was me, maybe I pulled away first without realizing it. There's no alarm bell when love starts to decay. It's more like a leak, slow and invisible, until one day your ankle, deep in a mess you can't explain. I began to notice the absences more than the presences. Her laughter felt rehearsed, her kisses lighter. One morning I woke up and her side of the bed was cold. Not empty, just cold. as if she'd been lying there, but left before sunrise. That became a pattern. I stopped asking where she went. I stopped asking a lot of things. I told myself not to be needy. I told myself that love isn't ownership. I clung to the idea that space meant trust. But space also meant distance, and distance meant forgetting. I kept hoping for signs. A gesture, a confession, even an argument. Something to cut through the fog and make things clear. Instead, she brought home a stray cat, named it Pilot. Said she found him limping near the bakery. It should have been sweet, maybe even a turning point. But I couldn't help but notice that she connected more with that cat in 2 days than she had with me in the last 2 months. It purred in her lap while she read poetry out loud. It followed her from room to room. It slept on her chest, and for once, I envied a feline. The nights grew colder, not because of the weather but because of the weight between us. Her touches became rare, mechanical. She stopped finishing my sentences. She forgot how I liked my coffee. I started sleeping on the couch, claiming it was work stress, that I didn't want to wake her with my early alarms. Lies, thin ones, but she didn't question them. Maybe she wanted the same distance. Maybe she was relieved. One day I found her packing a small bag. Just a weekend thing, she said. Visiting her sister, but she forgot to mention it was her ex's city. I knew, because I checked. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. It confirmed what my gut had been screaming for weeks. When she returned, she smelled different. Not of another man, of lavender and guilt. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. I was too afraid of hearing her confirm what I already suspected. Instead, I pretended everything was fine. Cooked dinner, told her about my day, laughed at the right moments. And that night, when she kissed me without meaning it, I kissed her back like it still meant everything. Because I couldn't let go yet. Not then. Maybe not ever. We dragged on like that for weeks. 2 ghosts in the same apartment, haunting the shell of something that once was holy. I started talking less. She started staying out more. We were both waiting for someone to break, to speak, to end it. But neither of us had the courage. Until one night, she didn't come home. No text. No excuse. Just silence. And in that silence, everything became deafening. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tracing invisible patterns with my eyes, trying to ignore the sting in my chest that throbbed in time with the ticking of the wall clock. Every hour she didn't come home became a sentence I couldn't unhear. I told myself she lost track of time, stayed over with a friend, had too much to drink. But the more excuses I invented, the clearer it became she didn't want to come back. Or worse, she didn't feel like she had to. Morning arrived without grace. The light bled through the blinds, casting long, accusing shadows across the room. Her side of the bed was untouched. Pilot sat at the footboard, tail flicking rhythmically, watching me with feline indifference. I got up, brewed coffee I didn't want, stared at the front door as if I could will her through it. She came back at 9:12 a.m. No explanation, no apology. Just walked in, dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, and gave me a nod that didn't even qualify as acknowledgement. I wanted to ask where she'd been. I wanted to scream, accuse, demand. Instead, I said nothing. I turned back to my laptop, hands trembling slightly, pretending to read an email I'd opened 20 minutes earlier. That became the new ritual, pretending. Pretending we were okay, pretending we were still us, pretending there was still something to salvage. In that silence, everything unsaid grew teeth. Days passed. The apartment grew quieter. Our shared life began to fracture in subtle, irreversible ways. She stopped leaving her books on the table. I stopped making coffee for 2. The scent of her jasmine perfume no longer lingered in the hallway. We were roommates now, at best. Strangers wearing familiarity like an old coat that didn't fit anymore. One afternoon I found her sitting in the living room, knees drawn to her chest, staring blankly at the window. She looked small, not physically, but emotionally, like a once mighty storm that had lost its thunder. I stood there for a minute, watching her. She didn't look up. I thought about going to her, placing a hand on her shoulder, asking what was wrong. But I didn't. I was tired of starting conversations she never finished. Eventually, she got up and left the room without a word. That night, I opened the box where I kept her notes. I read each one slowly, like decoding a forgotten language. Don't look for me in what I say. Look in what I don't. I'm not afraid of falling. I'm afraid no one will catch me. One day you'll understand why I never unpacked my suitcase. I'd read those notes 100 times before. But now, stripped of illusion, they felt like premonitions. She was always telling me she wouldn't stay. I just refused to hear it. I started walking more. Long, aimless strolls through parts of the city I never had reason to visit. I'd sit on park benches, watching strangers live their lives. Laughing, fighting, kissing. It gave me comfort, in a strange way, to know love still existed somewhere, even if not for me. One Sunday, I walked into a bookstore I hadn't been to in years. It smelled like dust and ink and something nostalgic. I ran my fingers along the spines of novels I used to love before love became the only story I lived in. I thought of Clara that first day. Fierce, unapologetic, electric. The version of her that made me believe again. That version was gone. Maybe she never existed outside my own projection. I bought a book I didn't really want and went home. She wasn't there. No text. Pilot was curled on the windowsill, sleeping like the world hadn't changed. It was 10 p.m. when she finally returned. I was sitting in the kitchen, nursing a lukewarm cup of tea, heart already rehearsing its defense. She looked at me with eyes that were somewhere far away and said, "We need to talk." I didn't answer, just nodded and gestured to the seat across from me. She sat down, crossed her arms, uncrossed them, then finally placed her palms flat on the table. "I don't think this is working anymore," she said. No hesitation, no tremble in her voice, just fact. Cold, clinical, final. I waited for her to elaborate. She didn't. The silence stretched, thick and unyielding. "How long have you felt this way?" I finally asked. She looked at me then. Not past me, not through me, but directly into me. "Hey, wow." "What didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted to want to stay." That hurt more than I expected. Not that she didn't want to stay, but that she had to try. I nodded slowly, the gravity of her words sinking deep. There was no fight left in me. No grand gesture or impassioned plea. Just a dull ache where hope used to live. "Is there someone else?" I asked, not because I wanted confirmation, but because I needed to understand the shape of my defeat. "Not in the way you think," she said. "There's no one waiting in the wings, but there's someone I met. And they reminded me what it feels like to be seen, not tolerated. Seen, that was the knife. Not the betrayal, but the implication that I had become blind, that somewhere between loving her and losing her, I stopped really looking. I stood up, unable to sit still under the weight of her honesty. I walked to the window, staring out at the city I suddenly felt disconnected from. "So, what now?" "I'll move out," she said. "Give me a few days. I'll stay with a friend in the meantime." "Okay," I whispered. I didn't cry, beg. I didn't crumble. I simply let her go, the way you let go of something you never truly held. Over the next few days, she packed quietly. No drama, no drawn-out goodbyes. She left the cat. Said Pilot preferred the apartment. That he never really liked her anyway. I knew it was her way of leaving a piece of herself behind. Her final note was taped to the bathroom mirror. "I hope you find someone who listens between the silences." I read it once, tore it up, flushed it. I didn't need her ghosts whispering through mirrors. I didn't tell anyone for weeks. Not friends, not family. I kept it inside, letting the grief marinate until it became background noise. I went to work. I smiled at baristas. I returned texts with emojis that didn't match my face. On the outside, I looked fine. Inside, I was all ash and echo. Healing isn't cinematic. It's slow and mundane and often invisible. It's remembering to buy groceries. It's deleting photos from your favorites folder. It's smelling her shampoo on your pillow and deciding not to cry. It's relearning how to be alone without feeling abandoned. One day I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about her first thing. That was the beginning. I didn't realize how much of myself I had given away until I started reclaiming the empty parts. I painted the living room a new color, donated the books she left behind, rearranged the furniture. It didn't erase her, but it diluted the outline she left. Months later, I ran into her by accident. Grocery store. She looked good, lighter, freer. She smiled when she saw me. I smiled back. We talked briefly, the way old friends do. No bitterness, no nostalgia, just two people who shared a storm and survived. As she walked away, I realized something strange. I didn't miss her, not the real her. I missed the version I built in my head. The version that never existed. The woman who would stay. And in that realization, something shifted. I finally understood she was never mine to lose. She was only mine to love while she stayed. And that had to be enough. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a loop, a spiral, a carousel of memory and relapse, of progress and retreat. There were days when I felt weightless, like I had finally shed her shadow. And then there were nights when I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with her name on my tongue and the scent of her in my lungs, even though she'd been gone for months. I started to believe there was no real finish line in letting go. Only a gradual silencing of the echoes, like music fading from a neighboring room. In the weeks that followed our encounter at the grocery store, I kept replaying it in my head. Not because I still longed for her, but because something in that brief conversation unsettled me. Her smile. It wasn't the cryptic, half-guarded smirk I remembered. It was open, clear. She looked like a person who had finally put down a heavy suitcase after carrying it too long. That should have made me angry, but it didn't. It made me curious. About myself. About what kind of baggage I still carried. I started therapy. Not because I was shattered, but because I was tired of taping over the cracks. I told the therapist about Clara, about the silence and the distance, and the way I'd bent myself into someone I thought she wanted. And somewhere between the sessions and the sleepless nights, I began to see my own patterns. How I confused emotional turbulence for depth. How I gravitated toward people I had to chase. How I found comfort in trying to fix what wasn't mine to fix. It was sobering. It was also liberating. I started saying no more. I stopped answering calls from people who only reached out when they needed something. I unfollowed accounts that made me feel inadequate. I cleared out my closet, my inbox, my life. I made space. For myself. For something new. And then something new arrived. Her name was Elise. She didn't come with thunder or fire or riddles. She came with calm. With steadiness. With questions that made space instead of demands that filled it. I met her at a community art class I joined on a whim, thinking I'd be terrible with a brush, but needing something tactile, something to anchor me. She was sitting across from me, painting what looked like a half-finished forest, her brows furrowed in concentration, tongue poking slightly between her lips. I remember thinking she looked like she existed just outside of noise, like her world moved slower. I liked that. She noticed me watching and smiled, not shy but certain. "Trees are harder than they look," she said, like we were already in the middle of a conversation. I laughed. I can't even get the sky right. Maybe the sky's not supposed to be right. Maybe it just is. And just like that, the door opened. Unlike with Clara, there was no guessing with Elise. She was emotionally literate, the kind of person who says what she means and listens to understand. She didn't play games or leave me decoding her silences. And yet, I found myself hesitating. Not because she wasn't what I wanted, but because she was. I wasn't used to soft hands after sharp edges. I wasn't used to peace after chaos. But I let her in slowly. Dinners that turned into walks. Walks that turned into shared Sunday mornings. She never rushed me, never asked for more than I could give. And maybe that's why I ended up giving her everything. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was performing. I could be flawed and moody and uncertain. And she met me there every time, with the kind of patience that felt like forgiveness. I told her about Clara. Not all at once, but in pieces, like showing her old scars that no longer hurt, but still itched when it rained. She listened, never judging, just nodding, sometimes reaching for my hand without words. "Sounds like she taught you a lot," she said once. I nodded. "Yeah, mostly about what I don't want to be again." Elise didn't try to be the opposite of Clara. She didn't posture or overcompensate. She just showed up day after day as herself. Steady, honest, present, and in her presence I started to trust myself again. Trust that I could build something not on passion or desperation, but on understanding and choice. That I could love without losing. We built our routines like quiet rituals. Sunday grocery runs, Thursday pasta nights, random Tuesday evenings curled up with books on opposite ends of the couch, our legs touching. And yet, even in all that ease, there was a part of me that kept waiting for something to break. I didn't fully believe in permanence anymore. So when Elise got a call one evening from her past, an ex who had moved back into town, wanting to meet up, I braced for collapse. She told me right away. Didn't hide it, didn't minimize it. "He wants to get coffee," she said, eyes searching mine. "I wanted you to hear it from me." I didn't respond right away. I didn't accuse or protest. I just nodded and asked, "Do you want to?" "I think I want closure," she said. Not reconnection, just closure. And somehow I believed her. Maybe because she earned my trust. Maybe because I wanted to be the kind of person who didn't let fear call the shots anymore. She met him. Told me everything after. There was no drama, no secrets. Just a chapter closing, gently with the honesty we all deserve but rarely get. That night I realized something. I wasn't scared anymore. Not of losing her. Not of being alone. Not of myself. I had changed. Love no longer meant possession. It meant presence. It meant respect. It meant choosing each other, day after day, without coercion or confusion. And we spent the next 6 months learning the rhythms of each other's lives. Her sleepy morning voice. My tendency to talk to myself while cooking. The way she always wrote birthday cards in advance and hid them in drawers. We started talking about moving in together. Not because we needed to fix something or because we were afraid of losing touch, but because it made sense, because she was home. We found a place downtown, nothing fancy, but with big windows and warm light and a kitchen island where we could dance while dinner burned. And just as we were starting to settle into this new life, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. My name scrawled in that familiar slanted print I thought I'd never see again. Clara. I stared at it for hours before opening it. My hands trembled like the past had hands of its own. The letter was short, no apologies, no explanations. Just a note. I thought you should know. I was wrong. You did see me. I just wasn't ready to be seen. I hope you're happy. I hope you're loved. To see? I read it twice. Then again. Then I folded carefully, placed it in a drawer, and walked into the living room where Elise was sitting, painting her forest again. She looked up. "Everything okay?" Yeah, I said, and this time I meant it. "Just a ghost from the past. Want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Okay." She didn't push. She never did, and I sat beside her, letting the silence stretch in comfort instead of discomfort. That letter didn't change anything. It didn't reignite old flames or reopen old wounds. It simply reminded me how far I'd come, how much I'd grown, how some stories don't need sequels, they need endings. Clara was a storm I survived. Elise was the sunlight after. And me, I was finally standing in my own weather. We moved in on the first weekend of spring, when the air was still cold but hopeful, like it hadn't yet decided whether to trust the warmth. Our new apartment was modest, tucked on the 3rd floor of a quiet building that overlooked a tree-lined street. The walls were bare, the floors creaked when you stepped too hard, and the radiators hissed like they were exhaling the ghosts of tenants past. But to us, it felt like possibility. We painted the walls ourselves, chose colors together, muted greens, soft grays, warm white for the kitchen. It was the kind of domestic ritual I once thought dull, the kind you do when love is steady, not when it's dizzying. And yet, there was something sacred about it. Something that said we're making space for each other in a real, tangible way. Elise and I didn't talk much while painting. We played music low in the background, occasionally humming or laughing when one of us splattered a little too much paint on the other. I remember glancing at her face speckled with white, her hair tied up in a messy knot, and thinking, I want this kind of love, the kind that builds, not burns. For a while, everything was quiet, in the best way. No raised voices, no prolonged silences, no secrets humming beneath the surface. We made breakfast together, learned each other's morning routines, and argued about small things like which side of the bed to sleep on or whether dish towels should be folded or hung. But even our arguments felt like conversations, not collisions. And then came the weekend with her parents. I'd met them before, briefly, at a holiday gathering where I was just the guy Elise is seeing. But this time, it was different. This time, I was the one she moved in with, and titles have weight. Her parents were kind but distant. Her mother asked polite questions, carefully avoiding anything emotional. Her father shook my hand too firmly and made jokes I couldn't tell were meant to put me at ease or put me in my place. Elise tried to bridge the gap, jumping between us like a translator between dialects of the same language. At night, we lay in bed and I asked, "Do they not like me?" She turned to me, brow furrowed. "They don't know you, that's all." Will they ever? They might not need to. We do? I wanted to believe that. I tried, but part of me, small and insecure, couldn't shake the sense that I was being measured, judged, and quietly found lacking. It shouldn't have mattered. But it did, because I wanted every part of my life with Elise to be whole. The cracks began small, like hairline fractures in glass. A missed date because of a work meeting. A forgotten text. A late return home. Nothing monumental. Just tiny failures in attentiveness. And I noticed them more than I admitted. She did too. One evening, I cooked her favorite meal. Mushroom risotto, the kind she always said reminded her of her time in Florence. And she came home with takeout. "I thought we were eating in," I said, trying not to sound wounded. "You didn't confirm?" she replied, holding up a bag of Thai food like a peace offering. "I shouldn't have to," I said, softer than I felt. We ate in silence. That night, she curled into me and whispered, "I'm sorry, I've been distracted. Work's been heavier than I let on." "I know," I said, "but don't shut me out." She nodded, and I believed her. But belief isn't a shield. The following week, she started coming home later. Not every night, but often enough that I noticed the pattern. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself she loved me, and she did. But love isn't always enough to stop someone from drifting. Sometimes, love is what makes the drifting hurt more. I tried harder, left notes on the mirror, bought her flowers, asked about her day and really listened. And she responded, grateful, touched, affectionate. But something was missing, not between us, within her. One evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, she paused, sponge in hand, and said, "Do you ever feel like you're exactly where you're supposed to be, but still not?" I looked at her, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean like your life fits, but you don't." I didn't know how to answer, because I had felt that once, with Clara. But not now, not with Elise. "Is that how you feel?" I asked. She didn't reply, just looked at me with eyes that were somewhere else entirely. That was the night I stopped pretending not to see it. Something in her was pulling away, not because of me, but because of something she couldn't name. A restlessness, a questioning, a soft unraveling. We still shared the same space, the same bed, the same routines. But the intimacy was different. Like a once familiar melody played in the wrong key. I didn't confront it. I didn't push. I told myself to give her room, to let her come to me. And maybe that was the mistake. Because sometimes when you give someone space, they use it to leave. I remember the night she told me. We were sitting on the couch, a movie playing that neither of us was watching. She turned to me, her face unreadable. "There's a job," she said. "Out of state? Seattle?" "Okay," I said, unsure where this was going. They reached out. It's kind of perfect, career-wise. And I think I want to take it, but. The words landed like stones, heavy, inevitable. When did you decide? I haven't yet, she said quickly. I wanted to talk to you first. I wanted to see if maybe. But she didn't finish the sentence. Because we both knew the end. Maybe I'd come with her. Maybe we'd do long distance. Maybe we'd try. But all of those maybes were just softer ways of saying goodbye. I didn't answer that night. I stared at the ceiling long after she fell asleep. Pilot curled between us like an unspoken witness. In the morning, I packed a small bag and left for a few days. Told her I needed time. I went to the cabin my brother used for fishing trips. No internet, spotty reception, just trees and silence and the occasional rustle of wildlife in the underbrush. I sat on the porch for hours, thinking. About her, about me, about how love, real, mature love, sometimes means letting someone go even when you want to hold them tighter. I came back 3 days later, sunburnt and exhausted. She was waiting in the kitchen, eyes red, rimmed but resolute. You should take the job, I said. She blinked. Are you sure? No, but it feels right, for you. We didn't break up that night. Not officially. We spent one more week together, laughing too hard, holding each other longer than necessary, saying things we meant and things we hoped the other would remember. And then, she left. She didn't cry at the airport. Neither did I. We hugged, kissed, whispered promises that maybe we both knew we wouldn't keep. And then she was gone. Just like that. I returned to the apartment alone. It felt different, airless. Her absence more present than her body ever was. But I didn't fall apart. Not this time, I just sat. Quietly. Letting the silence have its say. Because some goodbyes don't come with slamming doors or shattered plates. Some come with gratitude, with a deep knowing that what you had mattered, even if it couldn't last. I still loved her. I probably always would. But love isn't always a reason to stay. Sometimes, it's the reason to wish them well as they walk away. The weeks after Elise left were the quietest I'd ever lived through. Not painful in the dramatic, soul-wrenching way that Clara's exit had been, but subdued. Like waking up in a house you used to know and finding that every object had shifted slightly to the left. Everything was familiar, but wrong. I didn't cry much. That surprised me. I waited for the emotional flood, for the gut punch of absence, for the jagged grief to drag me under. But it never came. Instead, I felt this slow, hollowing sensation, like something had been scooped out from inside me and no one told me what to fill it with. I started doing ordinary things again. Laundry, grocery shopping, going to work. But I moved through them like I was underwater. Detached, slower, quieter. The apartment remained half ours for a while. Her scent lingered on the throw blanket, her coffee mug still sat on the drying rack, and her forest painting remained unfinished on the easel in the corner. I didn't touch it, not because I couldn't, but because it felt like disturbing something sacred. She'd left a few things behind. A sweatshirt, a notebook, a scarf. I packed them into a small box, taping it shut with more care than necessary. I sent it to her without a note. She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. That was the thing with Elise. She believed in clean exits, no dragging hearts across state lines, no unnecessary strings. Her way of loving was precise, respectful, finite, and it was that precision that made her absence feel like a missing key on a piano. Silent but obvious, people asked. Friends, family, how's Elise? How's the new place? Still living together? And I'd answer with vague nods and half smiles. I wasn't ready to explain that I'd been left behind gently, respectfully, lovingly, and that it still left a bruise. One night I poured myself a drink and sat on the balcony. The city was loud below, but the sky above was clear, endless. I watched the stars and remembered something Elise once said. I don't think we lose people. I think we just lose the right version of ourselves we were when we had them. At the time, I hadn't understood. Now, I did. I wasn't mourning her. I was mourning the version of me that existed in her world. The man who danced with her in the kitchen, who learned the names of her coworkers just to ask about them, who memorized the freckles on her back like constellations. That man had no place in this new quiet. He didn't vanish, he just adapted. I started going out more. Not to chase anything, just to feel noise again. I'd sit at cafes and read, go to concerts alone, lose myself in museums where strangers wandered with hushed reverence. I found comfort in places where people didn't expect answers. There was one spot I kept returning to, a secondhand bookstore tucked between a laundromat and a florist. The windows were fogged from age, and the sign above the door was missing 2 letters. Inside it smelled like dust and wood polish and forgotten lives. The owner, an older man named Martin, never asked questions. Just nodded when I entered and went back to cataloging paperbacks. I liked that. I liked being anonymous. One afternoon, while browsing the philosophy section, I noticed someone a few shelves away. She had short, dark hair and a focused expression, tracing titles with her fingers as if trying to remember something lost. We exchanged glances, just once. Not flirty, not awkward, just curious. I didn't speak to her that day, but I saw her again the following week. Same place, same section. This time, she smiled. "Looking for anything specific?" she asked. Her voice was calm, low, unpretentious. I shook my head. "Just passing time." "Time seems to pass slower in places like this," she said, running a hand along the shelf. "That's why I like it." Her name was Mira. She was a writer, working on a collection of essays about emotional memory, how smells, songs, even words can act as time machines. She lived nearby, walked everywhere, and had a habit of carrying 2 notebooks, one for facts, one for feelings. I found that endearing. Over the next month, we started running into each other on purpose. At first, it was the bookstore, then coffee, then long walks through the park where the trees were just beginning to bloom again. We talked about everything: childhood art, loneliness, favorite books, how painful songs hit differently when you're healing. With Mira, things felt weightless. Not because they lacked depth, but because there was no pressure to define or explain or justify. She didn't ask about my past right away, and I didn't volunteer it. It was a new rhythm, one that wasn't about erasing the past, but about not being governed by it. One evening, after a quiet dinner at a corner bistro, we walked back to her place in the rain. No umbrella, just shared laughter and damp sleeves. Outside her building, she turned to me and said, "You have the saddest eyes I've ever seen on someone who smiles so easily." I didn't know what to say. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," she said, "just honest." Honesty became our default. When I finally told her about Clara and Elise, I expected the usual polite nods or uncomfortable silence. Instead, she listened, really listened, and then asked, "What did you learn from them?" No one had asked me that before, not even me. I thought about it for a long time. "Clara taught me that chemistry isn't commitment," I said. "And Elise taught me that love without alignment eventually unravels." Mira nodded. "Ed, what are you teaching yourself now?" That question lingered with me for days. Because the truth was, I didn't know. I was learning how to exist between versions of myself, not chasing closure, not chasing replacement, just being. Mira and I didn't rush. We spent time together, but we also respected the solitude we both needed. She never tried to fill Elise's shoes, and I never tried to compare her to what I lost. It was slow, and safe, and sincere. And then life threw something unexpected. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. At first, I let it ring out, but they called again, and again. Finally, I picked up. "Is this Daniel?" a woman's voice asked. "Wes. I'm sorry to call like this. My name is Lee. I'm Clara's sister." My throat tightened. I hadn't heard Clara's name in over a year. "Is everything okay?" "No," she said softly. "She's missing." The word hit me like a cold slap. "What do you mean missing?" "She left her apartment 4 days ago, left her phone, her wallet, just disappeared. The police are involved. I found your name in one of her old journals. I didn't know who else to contact." I sat down, suddenly lightheaded. Why would she write about me? I don't know, but she did a lot. She wrote that if anything ever happened to her, you'd understand. I didn't understand. Not even a little. But something inside me stirred. An old age, a buried guilt, a question left unanswered. Mira was at my apartment that night. I told her everything. She listened, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she said only one thing. "Do you need to go?" "I think I do," I whispered. "Then go. But promise me something." "What?" "Don't go back to what broke you. Go to understand it." I nodded, and with that, I booked a train. Not to save Clara, not to relive anything, but to look the past in the eye one last time. Because sometimes, closure isn't something you get, it's something you choose to make. And I was ready. Or at least I wanted to be. ChatGPT said tittle. The love that stayed after everyone else left. The train ride was long and gray, carving a path through overcast towns and soggy fields that blurred into one another like the thoughts crowding my head. I kept staring out the window, trying to piece together what I would say if I found her. If I'd find her. Clara had always been a mystery I never quite solved, and now it felt like I was chasing a ghost who wanted to disappear. I wasn't sure what I hoped to accomplish. Closure answers, maybe just a goodbye that didn't end in silence. I arrived in the city where we once shared late night walks and cafe conversations that felt too heavy for our age. I hadn't been back since we broke up. Everything looked smaller, less cinematic. The apartment she used to live in had been vacated. Her landlord said she'd left months ago. Paid rent in advance. No forwarding address. The only clue was a package she left behind. My name written on it in thick black marker, tucked behind a stack of newspapers in the mailroom, as if she never intended anyone else to find it. My heart beat unevenly as I opened the package in a nearby cafe. Inside was a notebook. The same one she used to carry around, stuffed with her chaotic handwriting, ink smudges, and half-poems. Tucked in the first page was a note. Short. "If I disappear, it's not because of you. It's because I can't keep pretending I'm still someone worth staying for. I hope you remember me how I was before I started unraveling." See, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because the sadness was already familiar. Old grief being stirred, not born. I flipped through the pages. She'd written about everything. About me. About our early days. About Elise. About Mira, even. Mentioned only once. As a gentle shadow he deserves more of. I sat in that cafe for hours, reading and reading till her words no longer felt like blades, but like pages curling at the edges. Fragile, human, real. Later, I met with her sister Leah. She looked tired, drained in the way people look when worry becomes routine. She thanked me for coming and admitted she didn't know what else to do. The police had little to go on. Clara had a history of withdrawing when things felt too intense, but this time felt different. She'd left behind everything. Even Pilot, who was now apparently with a friend. Leah handed me one final note, found tucked inside Clara's medicine cabinet. Daniel always saw me. Maybe that was the problem. Some reflections hurt too much to live inside. For days, I wandered the city, retraced the places Clara used to love. The bookstore near the bridge, the diner that made cherry pie from a can, the tiny record shop she called her church. I asked questions, showed photos, begged for scraps of recognition. Most people shook their heads. A few paused like they almost remembered her, then kept walking. She had become a story I wasn't ready to end. And the more I searched, the more I realized I wasn't chasing her. I was chasing the part of myself that never stopped wondering if I could have saved her. But it was Mira's voice in my head that kept me grounded. Don't go back to what broke you. Go to understand it. And so I did. I stopped searching for Clara and started understanding her absence. She had always been on the edge, balancing between too much and feeling nothing at all. Loving her had been like holding rain. It soaked you, chilled you, but never stayed. I returned home 3 days later. My bag was heavier than when I left, but not with guilt. With clarity. Mira was waiting in the hallway, her arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Well?" she asked. "She's gone," I said. Like really gone. Like not coming back. In any form that makes sense. Mira nodded slowly. I'm sorry. Me too. I stepped closer. I need to ask you something. Okay. Can you live with someone who still has shadows? Not ghosts. Just shadows. She looked at me long and hard, then said, only if he knows how to stand in the light too. We didn't talk much after that. Just curled up on the couch, the soft hum of the city outside our window. I held her hand, and she didn't let go. Months passed. Seasons turned. Clara was never found. Some said she started a new life somewhere. Others believed the worst. I chose neither. I let her remain unsolved. Some stories don't need an ending. They just need to be put down gently. Mira and I continued to build our life. Slowly, carefully. We didn't rush into declarations or dramatics. We just showed up again and again. There were days we argued. Days I'd retreat into myself and she'd wait at the door, patient but firm. But we always came back. Always tried. And that's what made the difference. One evening, I found Mira sitting on the balcony, sipping tea, wrapped in the scarf I gave her the day we met in the rain. She looked at me and said, "Do you ever think about her?" "Wes," I said, "but not in the way I used to." "How do you think about her now?" Like a lesson that didn't fail me, just taught me something I wasn't ready for. Mira smiled. "Good." I walked over, kissed her forehead, and sat beside her. The stars were out that night, clear and sharp. No clouds, no distractions, just sky. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel the weight of what I'd lost. I felt the warmth of what I had. Mira didn't try to fix me, she just stayed. And sometimes that's all the healing you need. Not someone who arrives with answers, but someone who sits with your questions and doesn't run. I still keep Clara's notebook. Not because I'm holding on, but because some pieces of the past deserve to be remembered, not relived. It sits on a shelf beside Mira's essays, both of them reminders that love wears many faces. Some that bruise, some that break, and some that mend. The past taught me how to fall. Mira taught me how to land. And now, every morning I wake beside her, I don't think about what I've lost. I think about what I finally stopped chasing. And how sometimes the love that stays after everyone else leaves is the only one that ever really mattered. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.